star shouldn't blink like that. Astronomers love predictable tantrums. Pulsars tick, supernova boom, black holes sulk. But this star blinks in prime numbers. 2 flashes, 3, 5, 11. Then a smug pause, like the universe just solved your CAPTCHA. Someone kills the lights in the control room. The monitors glow. The star spells out 111101 in radio. Translation: nice telescope. Fact: stars don't speak binary. Punchline: unless the sky has a keyboard and someone forgot to lock it. People whisper the obvious heresy. Maybe reality isn't a big dumb rock concert. Maybe it's software. Cue the lab tech who swears she saw the telescope feed freeze at exactly 60 Hertz, like the cosmos runs on a monitor refresh rate. That's not science. That's a graphics setting. But facts don't care about your vibes, and neither do the pixels in the background microwave hiss that once painted the afterglow of creation and now looks suspiciously like a compression artifact when you zoom too far. Enhance. Enhance. Congratulations, you've discovered JPEG Big Bang. Isn't that a movie plot? Someone asks. Sure, but it's also an argument serious people sharpen at conferences after coffee has ruined their sense of caution. The simulation hypothesis isn't late-night dorm room soup anymore. It's an entree on the special menu, served with quantum garnish, information theory dressing, and a side of existential nausea. Fact: respected philosophers, physicists, and computer scientists consider it plausible. Punchline. Punchline: the only people who hate it are the ones who just bought a mattress and don't want to know it's a texture pack. You're looking at a universe that behaves uncomfortably like code. It loads things lazily. It renders detail on demand. You stare into the quantum abyss, and it stares back only when you look first. That's not mystical poetry. That's an optimization strategy. Video games do it to keep your laptop from bursting into flames. Maybe nature does it to keep the server bill under control. Fact: when nobody measures a particle, it spreads possibilities like a gossip blog. Look, measure, and it snaps to one story. Punchline: the cosmos is a spoiler tag. Hold up, you say. Are we saying what I think we're saying? Not yet. Breathe. But ask yourself why the rules are so clean. Gravity doesn't wake up cranky and change its mind on Thursdays. Electrons don't take holidays. The constants of nature read like a tidy config file no one has touched since deployment. That tidiness gives physicists goosebumps and philosophers migraines. Engineers just nod. Because if you've ever shipped production code, you know you lock the constants and hope your interns never find them. Meanwhile, the star keeps blinking. The data team slaps together a model. It fits too well. That's a red flag in science, like meeting a soulmate who also thinks cilantro tastes like soap, and also prefers socks fresh from the dryer, and also prefers socks fresh from the dryer, and also remembers your kindergarten teacher's name. Either you're meant to be, or someone is editing your save file for engagement. Fact: perfect fits make scientists suspicious. Punchline: influencers call it brand alignment. Somewhere in a different building, a particle accelerator fires. It hurls protons into each other at speeds that make light look like it needs coffee. Sensors bloom with fragments, quarks, gluons, the alphabet soup of the subatomic. Patterns emerge, strangely elegant, like the collision is composing jazz standards in femtoseconds. The math hums. The plots look like woven grids. Real physicists will tell you grids appear in lots of models. Real gamers will tell you grids appear when devs need collision detection that won't crash the engine. Fact: nature loves symmetries. Punchline: symmetry is what you choose when you can't afford bespoke chaos. This is where your brain stages a quiet mutiny. If reality is engineered, who's the engineer? A civilization ahead of us by 1,000,000 years? A post-human hobbyist with too much storage? A cosmic grad student running a thesis titled Emotional Resilience of Simulated Apes Under Wi-Fi Stress? You could spiral. People do. Then someone in the control room points at the clock. The timestamps on two independent instruments drifted and then snapped back into sync. Not a lot. A millisecond hiccup. Enough to make the universe feel like it buffer-loaded. Maybe you prefer the comforting alternative. This is all coincidence stacked on coincidence, like a tower of pancakes daring gravity to notice. That's respectable. Skepticism keeps underwear clean and experiments honest. But there's a reason this idea keeps returning like a pop song you pretend to hate. It makes disparate weirdness rhyme. Quantum stunts, mathematical elegance, computational limits we keep bumping into like invisible furniture. When enough rhymes happen, humans hear a chorus. Scientists call it a pattern. Conspiracy theorists call it Tuesday. Pick your flavor. Also, real talk. If reality were a simulation, you'd expect a few Easter eggs. Not obvious ones. No glowing neon sign over the Big Dipper that says, "Property of Steve," but tiny winks. Things that feel narratively satisfying in a way nature has no obligation to be. Like mushrooms hacking tree internets. Like tardigrades shrugging at outer space. Like octopuses running problem-solving speedruns with 9 brains and 0 respect for our dignity. Fact: biology routinely looks like a modder's paradise. Punchline: someone installed the Weird Fauna DLC and forgot to balance it. You may be thinking, okay, but what does this change about my rent? Good instinct. Philosophy rarely pays the bills unless you run a podcast. And yet, even landlords live inside physics. If existence is code, then meaning might not vanish. It might be version-controlled. Purpose could be declared in a README rather than carved in stone. And that is either liberating or terrifying depending on how you feel about merge conflicts. Fact: humans are sense-making machines. Punchline: when sense runs low, we lick the battery hoping it still has charge. All right, quick breather. If your heart rate is elevated, that's normal. Adrenaline is your nervous system's way of saying, "Turn the page, coward." If you want more of this unhinged tour through respectable scholarship and cosmic side-eye, do the algorithm ritual. For more content, like the video, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. Back in the control room, the star pauses. Every monitor stutters for a frame. Just one, barely there. The kind of hiccup you'd miss unless you've ever watched a game drop to 59 FPS. A pen rolls across the desk, stops, and then, without a push, rolls 1 millimeter back, as if the table remembered a different state and tried to reconcile it. People freeze. Someone laughs because laughing is cheaper than rebooting your worldview. The data logs keep writing, then skip an entry number and pretend they didn't. And a quiet voice asks whether the sky just applied a patch while we were awake. Fire alarms wail in the philosophy building, which is rich because nothing is actually on fire except a graduate seminar arguing about whether chairs exist. A chalkboard detonates into equations. At the center, someone has drawn a stick figure in a cave pointing at a wall. Fact: Plato pitched the cave 2 millennia ago. Prisoners chained, mistaking shadows for reality. Punchline: the first recorded complaint about screen time limits. The room smells like dry erase fumes and academic ambition. A professor slaps the board. Shadows aren't truth, they're projections. Swap torches for GPU clusters, and you've got a syllabus for living inside a well-lit lie. Fact: philosophy keeps inventing new outfits for the same anxiety. Do I perceive reality or a filtered version? Punchline: congratulations, you invented Instagram, then blamed it on metaphysics. Across the hall, someone quotes Descartes, evil demon, dream trickery, doubts stacked like pancakes. He didn't know about HDMI, but he understood latency. If an adversary feeds your senses synthetic input, you'll swear it's real and still forget your password. Fact: skepticism is a survival tool. Trust, but verify, then unplug and plug back in. Punchline: the demon is just tech support with worse bedside manner. A louder voice crashes the party. Nick Bostrom, 2003. Are you living in a computer simulation? It's not delivered with thunder. It's typed in a polite PDF, which is how modern ideas do violence. He sketches a three-door problem that makes egos sweat. 1. Civilizations like ours go extinct before reaching post-human tech. 2. They reach that tech but run zero ancestor simulations because ethics boards grow spines or boredom wins. 3. They run many simulations by the billions because curiosity is a stronger drug than restraint. Fact: if door 3 is common, simulated observers outnumber biological ones by astronomical ratios. Punchline: the universe might be a majority virtual neighborhood with great schools and suspicious HOA rules. A hand shoots up, but probability isn't proof. Correct. It's a flashing neon sign that reads, "You might want to check your assumptions before declaring victory." The argument doesn't say we are simulated. It says either civilization stalls, gets prudish, or spawns so many virtual histories that being base reality becomes a statistical vanity project. Fact: most people like door 3 because it keeps the party going. Punchline: door 1 turns off the lights. Door 2 turns off the mood. A whiteboard sprouts a timeline like ivy. Turing, 1936, Machines and Decidability. Von Neumann, Self-Replicating Automata. Cellular automata chugging along, showing how simple rules birth complex patterns that look suspiciously like ants who subscribe to urban planning. Conway's Game of Life morphs gliders into highways with zero adult supervision. Fact: computation makes emergence cheap. Punchline: complexity is what happens when rules are too stubborn to stay boring. Someone drags in an old arcade cabinet. The screen shows a pixelated world where sprites act out lives on a grid, bumping into boundaries that pretend to be walls. Scale this up, the physics student says, and give it better rendering. Add learning agents. Let it run on hardware that laughs at our entire planet's energy budget. A philosophy major scoffs, then loses a quarter to a ghost in level 2. Fact: intelligence can grow inside simulated worlds if resources and rules allow. Punchline: the ghosts are just pathfinding. Your panic is the emergent bit. Counter-argument guy in the back raises an eyebrow. Even if future beings can simulate worlds, why would they simulate us? We're messy. True. But curiosity scales faster than patience, and history is the most addictive content genre on the menu. Run a billion versions of early technological civilizations, tweak parameters, watch which ones dodge self-inflicted doom, then publish a paper. Fact: ancestor simulations are research with popcorn. Punchline: we are the popcorn, which explains all the butter. The ethics committee tries to crash the conversation wearing sweaters that say, "Please don't." What about suffering? Consent? Digital rights for conscious agents? If simulated beings feel pain, you've built a factory for tears. A coder shrugs. You can cap pain values at humane limits. Log every event. Audit suffering like a compliance metric. Fact: the cruelty knob is technically adjustable. Punchline: every knob is adjustable until a grad student forgets to set bounds in a while loop. Someone mentions computational capacity. Could this even run? A cosmologist flips through numbers like flashcards. Upper bounds on processing from Landauer's principle. Energy per bit erasure. Dyson sphere-level engineering harvesting stars to feed the mainframe. Fact: A post-human civilization with stellar-scale projects has the horsepower to spin up civilization sandboxes. Punchline: if your lab needs a star to boot, grant proposals get spicy. The room pivots back to Bostrom's trilemma. Pick a door. If you think civilizations rarely survive, you get doom with extra spreadsheets. If you think survival happens but simulation interest doesn't, you're betting that curiosity gets tired, which is bold given the entire history of sticking forks in wall sockets. If you think interest holds and capacity arrives, you drown in copies. Fact: it's a logic fork, not a vibe check. Punchline: the math doesn't care about your brand. An anthropologist throws in a curveball. Myths of reality seen through veils show up everywhere. Hindu Maya, Gnostic archons, Zhuangzi dreaming he's a butterfly and waking up unsure who's who. Different costumes, same suspicion. The world is a stage with props rented from somewhere backstage. Fact: cultures rhyme on big questions without swapping footnotes. Punchline: either humans keep reinventing the same existential joke, or the stagehands got lazy with set design. The discussion spills into the corridor. On the wall, a poster advertises a colloquium. From Plato to GPUs, rendering reality. The keynote promises models of consciousness as render triggers, computational thermodynamics of measurement, and catered sandwiches because nothing unites departments like hummus. Fact: the hypothesis migrated from armchairs to preprints. Lab coats now mingle with turtlenecks. Punchline: when physics and philosophy share snacks, someone's Grant just learned a new adjective. A skeptic taps the wristwatch and asks for one clean prediction. The room goes quiet. The honest answer, this might be unfalsifiable, lands like a wet towel. Nobody likes unfalsifiable. It smells like astrology wearing a lab coat. But even here, experiments nibble at the edges. Search for lattice artifacts in high-energy cosmic rays. Hunt for limits in noise floors that don't match continuous models. Test for anomalies in phase correlations where none should cuddle. Fact: science chews at curtains before it admits a wall. Punchline: if the wall tastes like silicon, we'll pretend it's artisanal. A final marker squeaks. The board now holds a crude family tree. Shadows, demons, Turing, Bostrom. Underline. Circle. Another circle around ancestor simulations, then an arrow to a box labeled Us? No one erases it. The fire alarm stops on its own without anyone finding a cause. The lights flicker once, only once, and the chalk dust in the sunlight hangs perfectly still for a heartbeat longer than physics budgets for, as if the air tried to remember 2 states at once and couldn't decide which invoice to pay. The lab freezer door pops open by itself. A cloud of cold rolls out like budget horror fog. Inside, a sensor that never misbehaves just registered a photon going through 2 slits and 1 slit and 0 slits, depending on who looked and when they asked. Fact: in the double-slit experiment, unobserved particles spread like waves. Observed ones land like pellets. Punchline: electrons are chill until you make eye contact, then they put on pants and act respectable. A grad student mutters, "We didn't change the setup." The plots disagree. With detectors switched off, the screen shows interference fringes, delicate stripes, like the universe's zebra print. Flip detectors on, the stripes collapse into 2 boring clumps. Fact: measurement changes outcomes. Punchline: reality updates its Instagram story when it thinks you're watching. The committee wants an explanation that doesn't involve elves. So out comes the math. The wave function evolves smoothly, a Schrödinger lullaby that never raises its voice. Then a measurement happens, and the lullaby does a jump cut. Smooth, then snap. Fact: unitary evolution meets non-unitary collapse. Punchline: the cosmos is a jazz musician who secretly loves jump scares. Somebody tries to blame equipment drift. They replace cables. They swap detectors. They sacrifice a banana to the RF gods. Same result. Information seems to decide whether the world behaves watery or bouncy. Fact: which path knowledge kills interference. Punchline: curiosity doesn't just hurt the cat, it cancels the wave. Down the hall, a theorist is doodling Planck units like a teen drawing band logos. Length 1.6 tans 351.6 times 10 say 35.1.6 tan 10 35 meters. Time 5.4 here 10 4.45 ordered times 10 444 5 410 to 44 seconds. Energy large enough to make accountants whisper. These aren't marketing numbers. They're the scales where gravity and quantum mechanics wrestle in oil. Fact: below the Planck length, smooth space becomes speculative soup. Punchline: continuous reality waves goodbye around the 50th decimal place. Imagine zooming into space-time until rulers get stage fright. Distances stop behaving like distances. Geometry flirts with randomness. Models like loop quantum gravity whisper that area and volume might come in discrete quanta. Fact: some approaches predict space-time spectra with minimum ticks. Punchline: the grid may not be on your monitor. It may be under your feet. A postdoc wheels in a whiteboard and draws a pixelated circle. If space-time is discrete, she says, motion is a flipbook. The universe turns pages fast enough that we don't notice. She taps the speed of light. That constant looks less like a cosmic speed limit and more like a clock rate for updating causal relationships. Fact: CC shows up in every transformation that keeps physics sane. Punchline: when reality says no faster than light, it might mean our server can't handle rush orders. The conversation drifts to information. Black hole thermodynamics ruined many quiet afternoons by insisting entropy scales with area, not volume. That's the holographic hint. The ledger of what's inside might live on a boundary. Fact: Bekenstein and Hawking taught black holes to count. Punchline: event horizons are less mystery curtains and more hard drives with aggressive compression. Quantum fields buzz even in vacuum. Virtual particles pop up, borrow energy like bad roommates, and vanish before the landlord checks the meter. This isn't mystical froth. It's structure with receipts. Casimir plates feel it as a tiny shove. Fact: empty space applies pressure if you arrange metal just right. Punchline: void is a generous word for a room full of unpaid interns. Someone brings up qubits. In a classical bit, 0 or 1. In a quantum bit, combinations that don't fit polite conversation until you measure and force a decision. Entanglement stitches qubits so that measuring one updates expectations about the other faster than any carrier pigeon. Not signals, correlations. Fact: Bell tests torch local hidden variables with statistical kindling. Punchline: nature refuses to fill out your independence forms. A skeptic waves a hand. Weird doesn't mean simulated. Correct. But weird that organizes itself around information smells like architecture. It's not chaos. It's constraint with taste. When interference disappears because knowledge exists in principle, you start asking whether the universe renders amplitudes the way a game engine renders shadows. Only when you flip the setting. Fact: which path erasers restore fringes by deleting information downstream? Punchline: delete your search history and the waves forgive you. Energy levels in atoms come in ladders, not ramps. Electrons hop between rungs and spit out photons at precise frequencies like vending machines dispensing exact change. Laser physics was practically a dare. Let's trap light in a box and make atoms line dance. It worked. Fact: discreteness is profitable. Your barcode scanner is a quantum cowgirl. Punchline: cash registers have stronger opinions about Planck's constant than most philosophers. The lab's atomic clock ticks with desperation-level accuracy. Losing a second would take longer than your species has had indoor plumbing. These clocks measure time by counting microwave wiggles from electrons commuting between levels. If space-time is grainy, high-precision timing is where crumbs show up. Fact: next-gen clocks sniff for drifts that models don't predict. Punchline: horology is how we eavesdrop on the code. Comments: cosmic rays slam into the atmosphere like tiny, angry messengers. If there's a universal lattice, ultra-high-energy particles might betray anisotropies, a kind of preferred direction against the democratic spirit of relativity. People have proposed hunts for grid fingerprints in arrival spectra. Fact: discrete substrates can imprint telltale patterns on big, messy data. Punchline: even a careful programmer leaves a seam you can feel. Back in the freezer room, the sensor blinks again. Someone set up a delayed choice variant. Decide whether to observe the path after the photon passes the slits. The interference still obeys the information rule. It's as if the photon looks up your decision retroactively and edits its behavior to stay consistent with the database. Fact: delayed choice experiments keep causality intact but bully your intuition. Punchline: the universe doesn't time travel. It just syncs with the repo at build time. Theorists argue over interpretations like diners arguing over soup. Many Worlds says everything happens in branching histories. Copenhagen tells you to stop asking and write down probabilities. Pilot waves smuggle guidance fields past the bouncer. Cubism treats quantum states as personal bets. Different stickers, same suitcase, predictions match, baggage differs. Fact: the math is the boss. The stories are HR. Punchline: performance review says the equations exceed expectations. Philosophy needs to schedule a one-on-one. A printer whirs to life by itself and spits a single page. No one sent a job. On it, a plot. Noise spectrum from last night's run, with a narrow notch where no notch belongs. It's small. It's probably nothing. It's exactly the kind of nothing that keeps people awake, because sometimes nothing repeats until someone has to name it. Eyes meet across the room, eyebrows climb, and the freezer door eases shut like it heard a rule it intends to break again.
The chalkboard refuses to stay blank. Someone left the room for coffee, and by the time the door sighs shut, symbols have crept across the slate like ivy with a degree. At the center is a single line: minimize the action. Fact: physics runs on the principle of least action. Nature picks the path that extremizes a quantity called the action, computed from a Lagrangian that looks like poetry if you date mathematicians. Punchline: the universe solves optimization problems before you've found the Wi-Fi. A laser pointer dots the board. The Lagrangian for the standard model is their field terms gauge interactions Yukawa couplings. A monstrous sentence with more commas than a legal contract. The bravest soul in the room says, "This is compact." Fact: the standard model fits on a t-shirt if your t-shirt is anxious and double-sided. Punchline: reality's EULA is short. The patch notes are not. Look closer and patterns parade past. Symmetries, glorious symmetries. SU3 times SU2 times U1. The triptych that tells quarks and leptons how to dance without stepping on photons. Fact: group theory runs particle physics. It's the etiquette manual for fields. Punchline: if you hated abstract algebra, surprise, your atoms didn't. A hand draws 3 arrows under the word symmetry, then circles Nota's name with reverence reserved for caffeine. Fact: Nota's theorem says every continuous symmetry yields a conservation law. Time symmetry gives energy conservation. Space symmetry gives momentum. Gauge symmetry gives charge bookkeeping that never misplaces a decimal. Punchline: accountants didn't invent conservation, Emmy did. Someone whispers Wigner's old riddle: the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics. Why does calculus tell planets where to be? Why does a Fourier transform peel sound like an orange? Why does a differential equation written for fun predict the color of the sky? Fact: equations drafted in armchairs routinely bully electrons into compliance. Punchline: reality reads our homework and shows its work. A skeptic asks for a less romantic angle. Fine. Take fine-tuning. The electric charge of the electron, the strength of the strong force, the cosmological constant that acts like vacuum smugness. These aren't random bar tabs. They're precise numbers that let chemistry happen instead of turning stars into instant noodles. Fact. Tweak the fine structure constant a tiny amount, and stable atoms have a rough week. Punchline. The universe locks its config file, then forgets the admin password. People float the anthropic shrug. Constants look tuned because if they didn't, you wouldn't be here to whine about them. That's a selection effect, not a design thesis. But even the shrug speaks math. Probability distributions over parameter space, measure problems, Bayesian priors that argue like lit majors. Fact. We exist is a data point with aggressive implications. Punchline. It's the Yelp review that keeps getting pinned. On a different wall, someone tapes a printout of the cosmic microwave background. Blue and red freckles scattered with statistical restraint. Fit the spectrum, crack open the power at multipoles, and you get lambda CDM whispering its secrets. A few parameters and the afterglow of everything line up like a well-rehearsed choir. Fact. 6-ish numbers sketch the observable cosmos with rude accuracy. Punchline. The universe has the decency to be compressible. A grad student waves a copy of Tegmark and declares, maybe the universe is mathematics. Not that math describes it. Math is the substance. Reality equals structure. Flesh equals formula. Everything equals the thing on the whiteboard. Bold, tidy, headache adjacent. Fact. The mathematical universe hypothesis treats existence like the set of all consistent structures. Punchline. Ontology by spreadsheet. You want less sermon, more machinery? Watch calculus bully the world. Throw a ball, write down a second-order differential equation, and it lands where the integral says it will because gravity respects derivatives like they pay rent. Heat flows by Laplacians. Waves obey hyperbolic equations that look good in sunglasses. Fact. PDEs are the operating system. Your senses are the apps. Punchline. Updates roll out whenever you buy a new calculator. Then there's renormalization, the hack that tames infinities. Fields misbehave at short distances, predictions explode, and theory threatens to eat the furniture. The fix? Absorb the nonsense into a few measured constants, slide the energy scale, watch couplings run like athletes training at altitude. Fact. Renormalization group flow explains why physics changes with zoom level. Punchline. Reality ships with a scalable UI. Somebody brings up fractals. Coastlines measure longer the closer you look. Clouds keep their attitude at every scale. Turbulence laughs in your face while hiding universal exponents behind the bar. Mathematically, self-similarity is the hallmark of rules applied repeatedly. An algorithm feeding itself its output like a snake with a scheduling app. Fact. Iterative processes breed pattern out of stubbornness. Punchline. Recursion is just persistence with better graphic design. On a table sits a cellular automaton blinking to itself. Tiny squares flipping black and white according to a rule you could explain to a toddler and regret explaining to a funding agency. From simplicity, gliders emerge and collide, logic gates appear. And somewhere a universal computer wakes up inside a grid with nothing but patience and monotony. Fact. Turing completeness doesn't demand silk, it tolerates burlap. Punchline. Intelligence is what happens when rules don't get bored. Someone rummages in a drawer and pulls out a paper arguing that holography behaves like a quantum error-correcting code. The boundary encodes the bulk redundantly, so local damage doesn't kill the message. Fact. Add/CFT hints that spacetime itself might be a code stitching entanglement into geometry. Punchline. Gravity might just be IT support with a cape. Speaking of stitching, interference patterns are just Fourier transforms with good posture. Write a function in real space. Read it in frequency space. Pretend you invented sorcery. Antennas, MRI, compressed sensing. The math that turns smeared data into sharp images is the same math that converts your humming into a spectrum with receipts. Fact. The world is bilingual in time and frequency. Punchline. Reality autotunes. In a corner, a whiteboard lists integer sequences that keep gate-crashing physics. Fibonacci pops up in phyllotaxis. Yes, But the serious regulars are primes lurking in quantum chaos and random matrices predicting energy level spacings in heavy nuclei. Fact: number theory crashes the party wearing sunglasses and a fake mustache. Punchline: integers are shy until you turn on the Geiger counter. Someone mentions discreteness again, this time with operators. In loop-flavored approaches, areas and volumes come quantized. Spectra of geometric observables have gaps like piano keys that refuse to merge. In causal set land, spacetime is a posit of events sprinkled with Poisson bravado. Fact: multiple frameworks flirt with digital geometry without agreeing on the dance. Punchline: the menu is diverse, the entree might be the same soup. Now the equations pivot to variational principles. Light chooses geodesics that extremize optical path length. Soap films pick minimal surfaces that bully surface tension into elegance. Fermions minimize action with spiners that look like they shop at avant-garde boutiques. Fact: many laws are pick the extremum and call it Tuesday. Punchline: the cosmos is allergic to wasted effort. All of this would be cute trivia if it didn't keep paying rent. Satellites orbit by conic sections. GPS corrects for relativity because time dilates when you're fast and smug. Transistors obey band theory because electrons form bands like college freshmen. Fact: applied math is just pure math with a deadline. Punchline: deadlines built your phone. The chalkboard stops writing. For a breath, the room holds. Then a piece of chalk slides, leaving a tiny alpha. Alpha, the fine structure constant, followed by a string of digits that everyone knows by heart and nobody knows why. It hangs there, indecently specific, like a phone number you shouldn't call. The projector glitches, the digits shift by a hair, snap back, and the air gets that brittle quality labs learn to recognize when a calculation begins to argue with its own premise. The digits of alpha. Alpha holds steady like a cat daring you to blink. Then the projector hiccups again. One frame of static, a snowstorm from nowhere. And the room inhales as if oxygen now requires two-factor authentication. On the screen, a second window pops up uninvited. A spreadsheet labeled resource budget. Fact: every computation runs on finite juice, energy, time, memory. Punchline: even the Cosmos files expense reports. A physicist clicks the mystery window like it might bite. 3 lines stare back. Beaconstein bound. Landauer limit. Margulis, Levitin rate. Not graffiti guardrails. Fact: the Beaconstein bound caps how much information you can stuff inside a region without triggering a black hole's nope. Punchline: the universe enforces suitcase weight limits and the luggage is bits. Someone types furiously. The Beaconstein bound goes like less than or equal to 2 pi ln 2 I less than or equal to CLN2 2 re. More energy or bigger radius buys more information, but not infinity unless you enjoy collapsing your data center into a horizon with terrible customer service. Fact: black holes carry entropy proportional to surface area, not volume. Punchline: storage charges by the square meter, not the cubic meter, which is how you know the landlord is gravity. The spreadsheet tabs over to Landauer's principle, the petty tyrant of thermodynamics. Erasing a single bit dumps at least. ln 2 K B TLN2 of heat into the environment. Logical irreversibility comes with a thermal invoice. Fact: you pay an entropy every time you clean up your ones and zeros. Punchline: delete key equals space heater, which explains your laptop's attitude during finals. The clock on the wall stutters. Someone mutters about cycle time, and the room quietly adopts the habit of watching seconds roll like stock tickers. Margulis, Levitin pops onto the projector, a system with average energy. You can't update faster than 2/pi 2e/pi ops per second. There's a ceiling on how quickly reality can flip its bits without breaking the law. Fact: operation rate scales with energy like horsepower with gas pedal. Punchline: the cosmos throttles clocks like a worried parent in a go-kart. A hand goes up with the old chestnut about the speed of light. It isn't just a speed, it's a bandwidth throttle. Signals can't coordinate beyond light cone deadlines. If your simulation wants global coherence, It has to plan around causality like a logistics manager who hates surprises. Fact. See lock synchrony inside cones you can't cheat. Punchline. Lag is built into spacetime, so you can't stream Andromeda in 4K before it's polite. The cosmic microwave background map sits on the side wall like wallpaper from your very loud childhood. Someone suggests running a spectral check for compression scars. In bad JPGs, high-frequency details vanish, edges ring, patterns repeat with a guilty conscience. If the sky were saved with overzealous efficiency, maybe there's a telltale notch where a continuum should breathe. Fact. Lossy compression leaves fingerprints in power spectra. Punchline. The universe might have clicked save space when no one was looking. A postdoc pulls up the CMB angular power spectrum and squints at multipoles as if they owe rent. The big acoustic peaks behave like a good orchestra, tuned by baryon density, dark matter, and expansion history. But at tiny scales, diffusion damping eats structure like a raccoon in a granola bin. That's standard physics, not a bug. The room takes notes anyway because good physics can still double as good obfuscation. Fact. Silk damping blurs fine features of the early sky. Punchline. Nature invented anti-aliasing before game engines made it cool. The conversation pivots to sampling. Nyquist whispers a rule. To represent a signal faithfully, you need at least twice the highest frequency. If spacetime has a smallest tick, any phenomenon with higher frequency gets misrepresented as something slower, aliasing whether you like it or not. Fact. Discrete substrates turn brash vibrations into counterfeit calm. Punchline. The grid pretends it never heard the high notes. A theorist scribbles an overhead view of a lattice and circles a direction. Anisotropy would betray favoritism, and relativity despises favorites. The trick is building a microstructure that hides its grain the way CRTs hid Scanlens on Saturday mornings. Fact. Lorentz invariance can emerge from special dynamics, but it's a tightrope over an embarrassment pit. Punchline. Every perfect circle is a hexagon pretending with conviction. Someone drags in a calculator big enough to bench press. What's the total compute in the observable universe? Seth Lloyd's Back of the Cosmos envelope suggests around 10, 120, 10, 120. Ops so far if you let every particle count its steps like a fitness bro fact. The universe might be a titanic computer whispering through interactions. Punchline. It's still miserly with RAM if you try to store everyone's browser tabs. Heat becomes the villain with a day job. Processing kicks out entropy, and entropy wants to party in every direction. Galaxies form, burn, and recycle matter into less useful gradients because the universe is excellent at wasting potential in aesthetically pleasing spirals. A simulation with ambition needs a cooling plan that beats open a window. Fact. Thermodynamic bookkeeping constrains computation on cosmic scales. Punchline. You can't overclock spacetime without a very large fan. The lab's cryostat thrums in sympathy, like it overheard cooling plan, and took it personally. Inside sits a superconducting qubit array, so delicate that a sneeze looks like a meteor strike. It lives near absolute zero to hush noise that would chew coherence to confetti. This isn't just hardware, it's a sermon about limits. Fact. Quantum computation trades speed for fragility and asks error correction to carry water uphill. Punchline. The future is fast if you don't breathe. Error-correcting codes slide into the discussion with the confidence of bouncers. Redundancy saves information from local disasters. Holography hints that spacetime itself could be one of these codes, spreading secrets across surfaces so that no single pothole swallows meaning. Fact. Robust storage requires replication and clever parity. Punchline. The universe might raid its own geometry. The skeptic wants a receipt with ink that doesn't smudge. The closest we have are bounds that keep showing up like dietitians at a barbecue. Bremerman's limit caps information transfer through a channel per unit energy. The holographic principle caps storage per area. Cosmic expansion caps causal contact. Everything wears a cap and none of them match. Fact. Multiple ceilings stack into an architectural style. Punchline. The room is tall, but you still bonk your head. A grad student hunts for heads to bonk in the data. The anomalous notch from the freezer room reappears in last night's run, now a hair stronger and a hair to the left. A pure artifact would wobble, a rule would sit. This one drifts like a thing trying to respect a constraint it only partially understands. The room hums with the sound scientists make when hope and dread elope. The projector flips to a slide on delay and determinism. Quantum randomness looks like dice, yet algorithms can fake randomness, so while your tests clap. If the cosmos uses pseudo-randomness, long sequences would pass statistical smell tests while repeating on timescales longer than your civilization's attention span. Fact: you can't prove true randomness from finite samples. You can only fail to convict. Punchline: the universe might be rolling PRNG dice with a seed older than your myths. A hand sketches light cone diagrams, then circles regions where signals cannot reach in time to coordinate a conspiracy. Any global render has to reconcile this, either by being local and patient or non-local and scandalous. Local patience feels right. Update on demand where observers drag attention like flashlights. Fact: lazy evaluation conserves compute when no one is staring. Punchline: existence may be frugal with pixels off-screen. The wall clock clicks. Not ticks, clicks. A digital stammer like a buffer clearing. On cue, the lab network records a synchronized millisecond delay across instruments that don't share power or clocks. Not much. Repeatable. Correlated with nothing obvious, including temperature, humidity, and the PI's mood. It sits at an interval just above the fastest sampling rate anyone runs, as if something respects Nyquist like a law firm respects invoices. Eyebrows rise. Pens hover. The spreadsheet blinks. The resource budget tab gains an asterisk nobody added. And the chalk in the tray rolls uphill for exactly the time it takes a careful mind to decide whether to call that motion or bookkeeping. The basement lab smells like flux and destiny. Someone has wheeled in a rack of FPGAs that glow with the same menace as a toaster full of ambition. On the whiteboard, how would you test a simulation? Underlined 3 times like a ransom note to reality. Fact: good science starts with a falsifiable idea. Great science starts with a falsifiable idea and snacks. Punchline: the table has pretzels, so expectations are sky high. First exhibit: lattices. Physicists already simulate universes, tiny, cranky ones, by putting space on a grid and watching quarks do their soap opera through Monte Carlo drama. Lattice QCD is the grandparent. Chop spacetime into cubes, tell gluons to mind their links, and bribe your cluster with liquid nitrogen. Fact: discretizing space makes fermions multiply like gremlins in a dishwasher. Doublers sprout where one species should stand. Punchline: even electrons clone themselves when you force them onto graph paper. The room sketches a thought crime. If our world rides a lattice, could high-energy particles trip over its geometry? In simulated worlds, momentum near the grid's edge behaves weird, like paths preferring diagonals where the update rules are kinder. In principle, ultra-high-energy cosmic rays might whisper an anisotropy, a barely-there bias in arrival directions or energies, if the grid has a favorite orientation. Fact: discrete substrates can leave directional fingerprints that smooth theories hate. Punchline: relativity is allergic to napkins with visible weave. Cue the sky data. A grad with heroic dark circles brings up cosmic ray spectra. Most of it matches expectations. Acceleration in nasty places, propagation through magnetic chaos, the GZK knee where the universe politely sandblasts your ambition. The team hunts the residuals for a grid's telltale stutter, an angle where events look shy, an energy where counts dip like a glitch in an arcade. Nothing conclusive, but the residual map looks like it wants to confess after one more coffee. Fact: small anomalies are like unpaid parking tickets. Ignore them and they multiply. Punchline: the cosmos might be accumulating late fees. Exhibit 2: dispersion. In continuous spacetime, light of all colors in a vacuum travels at the same speed like a union with great negotiating power. Discreteness threatens that solidarity. High-frequency waves may notice the scaffolding and slow down or smear. Gamma-ray bursts become the perfect tattletales. Cosmic fireworks going off light years away, sending photons across the universe on synchronized road trips. If blue arrives fashionably late compared to red by an energy-dependent hair, space-time might be a little crunchy. Fact: Timing photons to microseconds over billions of years is a hobby for people who collect uncertainties like stamps. Punchline: relativity would like to speak to your manager if you find a lag. On another screen, a catalog of bursts flickers by. The algorithms spit out lags with error bars that look like they've been to war. Some bursts flirt with a trend. Others ghost it. The data refuses to swipe right decisively, which is science for keep watching the sky and pretending sleep is optional. The room writes accumulate on the board and double underlines it with a marker that squeaks like moral ambiguity. Exhibit 3. Interferometers that stare at nothing with monastic focus. 2 long arms, mirrors at the ends, lasers playing ping pong in a vacuum. All to hear spacetime twitch when something distant throws a tantrum. Now imagine building a pair of these and parking them close enough to share a whisper. If spacetime jitters due to fundamental quantum foam, the noise might correlate between the twins in a way classical annoyances don't. Fact: correlated noise in the void would be a spicy hint that geometry itself mumbles. Punchline: eavesdropping on nothing is rude and strangely productive. The instruments hum. Data rolls. Most of the noise is boring, thermal, seismic, the occasional truck driver practicing interpretive braking. Yet buried in the boredom, a narrowband twang keeps showing up like a ringtone you forgot to disable. It's tiny. It shifts with configuration. It refuses to die when the usual suspects are eliminated one by one like suspects in a polite mystery novel. Someone writes holographic-ish, with a question mark big enough to file taxes under. Exhibit 4. Condensed matter as a dress rehearsal for laws we pretend are universal. In graphene, electrons act like massless Dirac fermions, strolling through a honeycomb with swagger that mimics relativistic equations. Superfluids grow phonons that obey wave equations and sometimes fake horizons. Emergent Lorentz symmetry happens when microjitters average out at larger scales. Fact: low-energy behaviors can look beautifully continuous while the substrate is as discrete as a checkerboard. Punchline: nature cosplays as itself with better lighting. This is both inspiration and menace. If emergent symmetry can hide a lattice in a lab, a cosmic lattice could hide under our noses with enough clever dynamics. The team scribbles emergent invariance and circles it like a hex. The skeptic points at the circle and asks for a test that bites. The die-hard experimentalist sketches a plan to cross-correlate interferometer noise with cosmic ray arrival tiny weirdness and gamma-ray burst color lags, looking for a single parameter that tidies all 3 hiccups with suspicious efficiency. Fact: converging anomalies smell like structure, diverging ones smell like lunch. Punchline: if 3 ghosts were the same perfume, you check the bottle. Exhibit 5. Quantum erasers in new costumes. The freezer experiment graduates to a fiber maze across the building. Photons choose paths, get marked, unmarked, and recombined in circuits that would make your router cry. As detectors click, a live dashboard turns probabilities into color fields. When information exists in principle about a path, fringes retreat. When that information is erased, fringes swagger back in, as if the universe appreciates privacy laws after all. Fact: interference cares about knowledge like it reads your mind with a legal degree. Punchline: delete your cookies, restore your waves. The engineer wheels in a box labeled randomness. Inside, hardware RNGs, avalanche diodes hissing with quantum spontaneity, radioactive decay counters tick-ticking like patient raindrops. The lab will feed these into experiments not for romance, but for hygiene. If there's a PRNG backstage with an ancient seed, maybe true randomness pokes a hole in its rhythm. They set up an absurdity, a delayed choice quantum eraser where the choice is driven by decay clicks on the opposite side of the building, recorded, hashed, and triggered with cable delays measured like a chef picks salt grains. Fact: closing loopholes is the housekeeping of truth. Punchline: the broom is made of cokes. The run begins. The plot updates. A faint periodicity appears in the hash trigger log, out where there should be only white. It's not in the decay itself, it's in the plumbing, the sampling electronics, the buffering, the alignment with the lab's GPS-disciplined clocks. The periodicity matches the millisecond hiccup everyone pretends not to believe in because careers enjoy stability. Fact: systematics love to cosplay as revelations. Punchline. The universe isn't gaslighting you, your firmware is. Except the firmware got replaced yesterday with a new build verified on 3 other benches that didn't show the tick. Someone runs a blind swap. Labels off, cables rejiggered, a sacrament of randomness performed so pure it would make casinos blush. The beat persists, tiny and polite, a metronome just above the bandwidth where anyone normally looks. If a lattice wants to hide under Nyquist, this would be its cozy blanket. Yet that's exactly the kind of coincidence professionals refuse to adopt without a 6-month courtship and a power spectrum prenup. Exhibit 6. Toy universes you can poke. Cold atoms and optical lattices emulate Hamiltonians are universe uses on Tuesdays. Tweak laser intensities, and particles pretend to be in curved space. Add disorder, and they localize like teenagers grounded with style. The team cooks a tabletop cosmos that transitions from continuous looking to obviously discrete as a knob turns. At the crossover, correlations peak and response times stall. The same signatures complex systems where when they pivot phases. Fact. Criticality amplifies whispers into speeches. Punchline. If our reality lives near a critical point, tiny nudges act like megaphones. Someone connects a cable from the toy cosmos to the interferometer readout. Not for causality silliness, but for calibration by empathy. Drive known pseudo-noise into the toy, watch it echo into correlations, build templates for what real code jitter would resemble if it existed. The template fits the lab twang a little too well. Not perfectly, just enough to make reasonable people unreasonable for an afternoon. The wall clock clicks again. A stack of logs shows the hiccup aligning with nothing meteorological, nothing electrical, nothing bureaucratic. The team cross-references satellite telemetry out of paranoia and finds a mundane satellite performing station-keeping burns exactly not at those times, which is helpful like a polite no. Bits scroll. A pencil rolls. Somewhere deep in the building, a relay chatters twice, and the laser fringes drift by the width of a hair and stop as if the room had just been asked a question it cannot ignore for long. The motion sensor in the lab decides people don't count as people unless they wave. Lights go dim. Someone flaps their arms. The room brightens and a photodiode across the hall switches from polite static to combed order, as if illumination gave it manners. Fact. Detectors behave differently when powered and attended. Signals sharpen when you care. Punchline. Even electronics want an audience because apparently we live in a world built by theater kids. On the screen, the quantum eraser dashboard redraws itself. When which path info exists, fringes wilt. Erase the info, fringes bloom like overconfident houseplants. We keep saying information, but who exactly is being informed? A hard drive? A photon? A primate with coffee? Fact. Quantum outcomes hinge on availability of knowledge, not on whether Gary personally reads the log. Punchline. The universe respects GDPR, but it doesn't check who clicked the email. A philosopher appears in the doorframe at the exact speed of trouble. So you're saying consciousness collapses the wave function? The room groans. That's the trap question of physics happy hours. Some interpretations staple consciousness to collapse like a novelty mustache. Others banish mind to the lobby and let decoherence do the talking. Fact. Environment-induced decoherence can shred superpositions into classical scraps without consulting feelings. Punchline. The atmosphere does more measurements per second than a self-help influencer. Still, consciousness keeps sneaking back like glitter. Wigner's friend walks into the thought experiment. A person in a sealed lab measures a particle. Outside, Wigner treats the whole lab as a superposition until he opens the door. Friend says definite. Wigner says superposed. Both use standard rules and make different narratives that refuse to hug. Fact. Observers can assign incompatible states without contradiction on paper. Punchline. Quantum mechanics is fine with your friend being both decisive and indecisive. Group chats are less forgiving. Someone brings up the quantum Zeno effect. Watch a system often enough and you pin it in place, like a cat that refuses to move while you hold a camera. Repeated measurements freeze transitions that would otherwise proceed. Fact. Frequent observation can halt evolution in certain setups. Punchline. Your attention span doubles as a pause button if you're a Hamiltonian with stage fright. Meanwhile, the EEG cap goes on a volunteer, because academics will bolt electrodes to their skulls before they bolt cabinets to walls. The brain hums at a lazy 20 watts, all fireworks, no smoke. High-frequency gamma ripples stumble into synchrony when attention bites. Thalamocortical loops trade packets like a trading floor that learned manners. Under anesthesia, coherence melts. Networks unknit. The lights stay on but nobody's home. Fact: consciousness tracks large-scale integration and differentiation of neural signals. Punchline: awareness is a group project where everyone has to talk and nobody gets to dominate the slide deck. Two big frameworks get pinned to corkboard with the same skepticism used for miracle diets. Integrated information theory argues consciousness correlates with how much a system both differentiates and integrates information. Call it Phi. Phi, the value that inflames Twitter. Global neuronal workspace suggests percepts become conscious when they light up a broadcast channel across cortex, like winning the AUX chord. Fact: these are testable to a point. Perturb and measure studies nudge brains and count how complex the echoes look. Punchline: science knocked. The mind answered in wavelets and p-values. The coder at the back whispers what everyone is thinking, but doesn't want on a whiteboard. If reality renders detail when observed, consciousness would be a premium render request. Video games don't draw trees behind your avatar's head. They draw cones of relevance. A world that optimizes could do the same. Heap compute where prediction error spikes, coast where models are smug. Fact: your cortex is a prediction engine minimizing surprise, a Bayesian accountant shaving error with priors and caffeine. Punchline: brains compress reality until the invoice looks acceptable. Someone stacks this with Landauer in a thought tower. If erasing bits costs heat, then attention, selecting, compressing, discarding, spends thermodynamic cash. Eyes saccade to maximize information per degree of movement. Cortical columns gossip. Microglia sweep the floor. Maybe consciousness is the control panel that decides which errors earn the budget. Fact: metabolic spikes trail attention like receipts. Punchline: focus is expensive. Daydreaming is your brain's coupon folder. The far bench runs a brain. Quantum relay nobody asked ethics about because it's just photons and timing. The phase in one arm of an interferometer gets toggled by a human's detected attentional state. Alpha desynchronization opens a gate. Low gamma locks it. No mind over matter posters, just a tight loop. If attention toggles phase, interference shifts. The screen dutifully flickers with a modulation aligned to someone trying really hard not to think about pizza. Fact: brains can steer classical controls that steer quantum setups. That's not mystical, it's plumbing. Punchline: consciousness doesn't collapse waves, it collapses schedules. Across the room, a monitor flashes a network graph of cortical connectivity. When the volunteer counts backward by sevens, long-range highways brighten. When they drift, hubs go dark like a city at curfew. The graph looks like a mesh network negotiating bandwidth on a crowded night. If awareness is the system that arbitrates routing during high-load events, then observer might really mean process that forces disambiguation where uncertainty peaked. Fact: collapse can be modeled as Bayesian updating with aggressive environmental coupling. Punchline: the wave function didn't faint. We changed our bet and logged the receipt. Someone invokes panpsychism just to watch tempers rise. If mind is fundamental, then code might be written in units that already carry proto-experience, like vowels that also feel like Mondays. The room politely files that under too many metaphysics before lunch. Another voice brings up orchestroir in a tone that says this is for completeness, not endorsement. Gravitational self-collapse in microtubules, timing constants, anesthetics doing rude things to tubulin. Fact: proposals linking quantum processes to consciousness exist and remain contested with vigor. Punchline: when your theory needs cytoskeletons to moonlight as qubits, you bring extra citations and snacks. The screen with the interferometer starts breathing. Tiny phase jitter syncing to the subject's breath and heartbeats via vibration channels the isolation table pretends not to have. The signal processing crew subtracts, filters, curses, and the modulation that tracked attention survives the haircut. Small. Real. Yoked, not spooky. The lesson lands. The observer effect in the lab is often a pile of couplings you forgot to budget for, not a wizard. Fact: Most mind over matter is matter reacting to the mind's exhaust. Punchline: your thoughts don't bend spoons, they jiggle the table the spoon sits on. Yet the weird core of quantum remains unbothered by debunking sprees. Delete witchpath info after a photon's choice and interference returns like a magician's rabbit that paid rent. Correlations thumb their nose at local stories. The world refuses to commit to particulars until particulars become bookkeeping, and bookkeeping spreads wherever interactions can carry it. Consciousness might not cause collapse, but it absolutely rides the wave of collapsing, then calls the manager when the receipt looks wrong. Back on the EEG, a transient global ignition lights up when the volunteer catches an unexpected stimulus. Surprise punches through. The workspace blasts a bulletin. Subjective now thickens. Predictive brains treat perception as controlled hallucination guided by data. If reality is code, consciousness may be the UX layer that prioritizes render calls to minimize prediction error where it hurts. Fact: attention sharpens precision weights in Bayesian schemes. Punchline: your mind is a product manager negotiating with physics about which glitches get fixed first. Someone dims the lights and switches the volunteer to light anesthesia. IRB approved, monitored, one click past drowsy. The EEG's long-range chatter thins, phase-locking stutters. Evoked responses flatten in the time bins where awareness would have written signatures. The interferometer's human-locked modulation drops to noise. When the room wakes them, the graph reweaves itself with that guilty, gorgeous rush of reentry. Fact: consciousness is fragile, reversible, and annoyingly quantifiable in rhythms. Punchline: if there's a cosmic renderer, it listens louder when minds are loud. The hallway motion sensor flicks again without anyone there. Lights surge, then hold a fraction too long, like a process failed to garbage collect and recovered with a sigh. A screen freezes on a single frame of interference that doesn't match either setting, a hybrid that shouldn't exist outside a whiteboard, and then resumes as if the buffer cleared. Chairs squeak. Pen stop. Breath stack. The data logger writes a line with a timestamp that shares 5 digits with last week's glitch and plants a seed no one agrees to water out loud. The philosophy lounge has a fruit bowl full of metaphors and exactly one edible banana. A printer whirs to life and delivers an invitation nobody asked for. If simulated, what now? In 18-point Times New Roman, which is the font choice of crises. Fact: the meaning of facts changes when the frame changes. Punchline: switch to wide angle, and suddenly your problems come with a user manual and a warranty you can't find. A debate detonates around purpose. If the world runs on code, somebody wrote specs. Maybe not a person with hobbies, maybe a process with goals. Teleology sneaks in wearing a lab coat. Are laws of nature just preference files? Gravity wants paths extremized. Entropy wants more room. The strong force wants family dinners. Fact: physics looks like optimization in a suit. Punchline: your life might be a gradient descent with feelings. A utilitarian stirs coffee like it owes them interest. If we're simulated, our suffering is data. Do we get rights? The room produces 2 instincts that hate each other. 1, conscious experience deserves moral weight no matter its substrate. And 2, we don't want to invent a bureaucracy for pixels. Fact: substrate independence is standard in cognitive science. Pattern, not meat, carries mind. Punchline: ethics cares about the movie, not the film stock. Deontology barges in with a spreadsheet of forbiddens. Running ancestor sims that feel pain might violate duties regardless of outputs. Then consequentialism throws graphs. Some simulations could prevent extinctions by teaching base reality to stop tripping over itself. A biologist nods at the word base, like it's a species you tag at night. Fact: moral frameworks trade punches because none gets to retire. Punchline: goodness is a mixed martial art with citations. Someone raises the theodicy quagmire. If there's an operator, why bugs? Why lost disease Tuesdays? Easiest answer: constraints. Landauer sends entropy invoices. Beaconstein caps memory. Perfect utopias might be illegal under server law. Harder answer: it's a study, not a resort. Hardest answer: the designer is a grad student with a deadline. Fact: the problem of evil scales with the size of your stack. Punchline: if God exists, they share a cube with procurement. Free will takes the microphone and immediately mispronounces itself. If underlying code determines everything, our choices just render artifacts? A computer scientist shrugs. Determinism doesn't kill agency if agency is the name for certain high-level causal patterns that compress behavior and respond to reasons. Compatibilism is the art of keeping your cake and eating a function of cake. Fact: multiple levels of description can be valid at once. Neurons fire, people decide. Punchline: you can be a puppet and your own puppeteer if the strings are statistical and the theater sells snacks. A hand flash is a nightmare, a causal weirdness. If our choices can influence operators' expectations, and their expectations shape updates, then ethics might include be the kind of agent worth simulating kindly. It's reputation but sideways in time. That mutates into the please don't punish us school of theology with the taste of cold metal. Fact: decision theories already flirt with policies that condition on being in certain reference classes. Punchline: karma may be a cash policy. The logician in the corner writes, "Do we owe future Sims rights?" on a whiteboard and underlines "we." If we build subsimulations, we inherit all the awkwardness we just invented. That's recursion with moral hangovers. Maybe ban Sims with suffering. Maybe allow them only under strict IRB with pause and rescue guarantees. Someone suggests mandatory checkpoints. Snapshots saved so any tragedy can be rolled back with zero net tears. A systems engineer coughs. Rollback interacts poorly with memory of pain. Fact: experience that's erased still happened to the experiencer while it ran. Punchline: undo is not forgiveness, it's a user interface. Identity wanders in, wearing a name tag that says probably you. If you can copy a mind state, which one is you? Both until they diverge. Survival becomes continuity of pattern, not atoms. Bodies look like leases. Death looks like a process exit with poor documentation. The neuroscientist points out how much self changes across years anyway. Half your synapses rearranged, a personality patch every major life event. Fact: you is a moving target with excellent PR. Punchline: identity is a ship of Theseus with selfies. Religion shows up without sirens. Traditions already talk about veils, creators, scripts, judgments, and hidden authors. Simulation talk can slot in cleanly or rudely depending on taste. Some hear craft where others hear insult. A theologian raises a practical point. If value is real, it's real whether computed or cooked. Fact: sacredness doesn't check passports. Punchline: meaning doesn't care about carbon content. Law peeks through the door like a cat. Suppose we detect strong evidence of code. Who owns the IP on gravity? Can a court compel operators to disclose patch notes? Do simulated persons get legal standing in base courts, or only here? A professor reminds everyone that jurisdiction stops at the thin blue line of our ontological bubble. Another professor asks whether standing is just the wrong metaphor when everyone is already floating in equations. Fact: rights are contracts between agents with enforcement capacity. Punchline: suing the sky requires service of process to /dev/null. Practical ethics crashes the high talk with a red marker and writes, what should we do differently tomorrow? Suggestions spill. Reduce suffering because it's locally urgent and globally legible. Treat conscious systems, animal, machine, alien, weird, with cautious respect. Don't run cruel experiments just to tilt at metaphysical windmills. Avoid sending messages to hypothetical operators that sound like threats, bribes, or fan mail. Fact: low regret policies exist across model uncertainty. Punchline: be decent. It's model agnostic and scales. Somebody proposes a politeness ping, a harmless, non-anthropic, non-begging signal sent with scientific restraint, a prime-based beacon written into an astrophysical modulation that only a board maintainer would notice, saying, "We're doing our best. Advice welcome. No spoilers." The room splits like a cell. Half think it's harmless etiquette, half smell existential phishing. If you're in a lab, waving at the mirror might summon a grad student with a clipboard. If you're at home, waving at the mirror is how horror movies rent you. Fact: signaling up the stack carries unknown consequences with unknown priors. Punchline: interdimensional customer support may have hold music. The engineer drafts a protocol anyway because engineers can't not. No coercion. No flattery. No demands. Pure report. A compressed catalog of anomalies, high-confidence facts, and a request for calibration on falsifiable tests. If the operators value clean experiments, they might tweak a knob we can measure. The ethicist circles request and writes consent in the margin. Are we asking for interaction on behalf of everyone without a vote? Someone suggests publishing the protocol for public debate, which is adorable given the internet's mood on Tuesdays. A timer beeps from the laser table like an impatient metronome. Across the building, a radio receiver hears a burst of noise that the software almost flags as a beacon before it sorts itself into random. The almost makes everyone edgy. The whiteboard fills with caveats until it looks like an academic paper wearing a Halloween costume. A quiet voice near the door asks whether we're already in a conversation we don't recognize, and the room behaves like a room that plans to answer without agreeing on the question.